And I think that's, introduce yourself to each other as we bring the Dream Team forward. They're part of the series this fall, and if you don't know about them, you'll learn all about them today. Our guest presenter today is going to be interviewing them. Blair, I think everybody was here for the sermon, but if not, why don't you just say a word about what you do and your involvement? And let's hear from the Dream Team.
Thank you so much. So my name is Blair Pogue, and I have a very fancy title. I'm the Canon for Vitality and Innovation for the Episcopal Church in Minnesota, meaning I am focusing on so many of the things that the Dream Team is doing and trying to get congregations to engage in this incredibly life-giving work of going deeper in following Jesus in daily life, in being curious about what the Holy Spirit is up to in the lives of our neighbors, both our physical neighbors as well as our church's neighbors. For some of us, those are different neighborhoods. And I'm just working on all kinds of stuff that around discipleship and innovation. In fact, yesterday we just had a gathering with 14 Episcopal Church in Minnesota churches. 13 have gone through something called a faithful innovation process I'm running. Diane Barnett has been part of that. And the most wonderful thing is the Augsburg Innovation Hub Dream Team here is doing similar work. So Rosemary and Sheila came yesterday and shared their learnings and what they've heard and done, and they just blew away the group that was gathered. It was just this amazing time of sharing spiritual practices and experiments. So I think that's enough of that, but I'm really excited to interview them today, because I know I didn't realize that you had been doing this work for 5 years, which set you up so nicely, you said yesterday, for COVID, and being able to be agile and change gears quickly. But I was wondering here how your curiosity for the neighborhood began, and who and what were you curious about? How did that all start?
Well, I'm Sheila Foster, by the way. I am the Director of Community Involvement. And so luckily for myself, I have been in this neighborhood for a very long time, because my in-laws just live a few blocks, and we actually had to live there before we bought a house, and I was very pregnant. But I've also lived at Cliff and Kathy's house as a teenager. So I've on the weekends when I wasn't in Rochester. Thank you for that. But I learned a lot about the neighborhood during all of that time, both with how the people of this church utilized this environment. This was a gathering space. This is where all the kids hung out. All of the kids who I hung out with at church, or the diocesan church, they all went to this church. So I got to hang out with people who were from the big city, and I was from, at that time, a small town. So I had my eyes on this neighborhood for a very long time. And when I began back in 1999, the first time around that I worked here, I had the opportunity to start, I myself was curious about the neighborhood and what it was becoming, because at that time, I didn't live in this neighborhood all the time. So the only time I was here was when I was working. So there were all these moments of meeting the neighbors just by chance that started to get a sense of what the neighborhood was about and what they cared about. So, fast forward, like 20 years, all of those kinds of learnings where I was curious and we were kind of tapping into some of those curiosities, all of a sudden when in 2018, when we got the invitation from Riverside Innovation Hub to be a part of a process with support and with other congregations to be able to work with and learn from as well in different places, because this neighborhood is very different than other people's neighborhoods. And what works here may not work there, but then again, what works someplace else might work here. But we have to risk trying things and experimenting. Sometimes things work, sometimes they don't. But the key is knowing our neighbors and knowing what they care about as well. And so that's where that curiosity comes in, of getting to know our neighbors and know what they care about.
Sure. I'm Rosemary Casper. I came from St. James, and I remember hearing about the things that the Dream Team did. The first time that folks from St. Luke's came over to St. James when we were courting each other. And Steve Richard got up and talked about an experience that was going to happen here with a dinner and an opportunity to talk to neighbors. And this was one of the things that the Dream Team, as they were called here at St. Luke's, was doing as a way to open the door to become a public church and have contact with the neighborhood. And so when we all joined together in July of 2020 amidst the COVID pandemic, and we all joined electronically on Zoom, we had the opportunity to talk and see what was happening with each other and what we were interested in, and many of us from the other side, 35W, didn't necessarily know what was happening on this side of 35W and vice versa. So when I joined the Dream Team, it was a way for me to continue my work, my curiosity, and things that we had done at St. James in our neighborhood, through food shelves, making the sandwich lunch, connecting with our neighbors, and working with our neighbors in Haiti, which is not our neighbors outside the store, but our neighbors in a real way. So that was a way that we began to do that, and there were things that had already started happening here that were interesting to me and other people, so that the group morphed. People came, people left, people added their contributions, and we were able to think about other ways to open the door and connect with our neighbors and hear what was happening there.
Hi, I'm Tom Erickson. I am a full-time student at Oxford University, and I followed Sheila here. And while I agree with completely and delight in what both Sheila and Rosemary said, there's a personal side of this too. I'm hoping to grow every day as a Christian, and I feel like I'm really good at showing up and caring and loving and participating, but I also have felt historically like I'm bad at evangelism. When you ask yourself the question, when's the last time you invited someone new to come to church with you? Like, that was a question where I sort of ducked and sulked a bit, because I wasn't out doing that. And so this gave me an environment where I can comfortably go out with people from our church and talk about what we're doing here and talk about why we're doing it and how we're doing it, and share more concretely the message of Jesus and the message of the gospel with people who we aren't already comfortable sharing that message with.
Thank you. I wonder how you did discernment about God's leading on this, just about this is something we really felt called to do, and then also, what did you do how did you find ways, or come up with ways to listen to your neighbors' stories?
Well, when I got here, one of the first things that we were talking about was the Feast Day celebrations that had started the year before, 2019. And, those of us from St. James had done many things out, and we had a major celebration for the 4th of July on the front walk where 300 people came from our community, from the neighborhood, from the community of those in the Jewish faith, and from many Muslim neighbors. And we had a wonderful time reading, listening to music, talking to each other, So I had that experience, but I think here it was a totally different community. It was a new space for me. And what I was excited about when we talked about Peace Day was that we were going to be outside on our, as we now call it, front porch, under the tree, and be there all day and connect with people around the issue of peace in September. So that was my first active involvement with that, and also with the giving trees. And now, how many of you have put something under the giving tree or put it in a box? How many of you have come to our Peace Day celebrations and made a flag and talked to people who might just have walked down the block or saw a flyer and came and joined us? So that was a way that we could do that, and that was a comfort for me because it was also a way for me to meet this community, because we were when we got married, and you don't always know your in-laws right away, you know. So they're good in-laws, but you don't always know that. But there was also the community at large that we were connected with. So that was important, and that was a discerning way because we knew that the families in the community in the neighborhood had children. They loved to do activities with their kids. They loved to eat. We all like to eat. And many of us celebrate holidays in the wintertime. So they were giving trees. They weren't just Christmas trees. So that was an opportunity for us to really reach out. And it was a very cold day when we put our first trees up before Advent. And we were all wearing masks and staying 6 feet apart. But we had a wonderful experience, and many people in the neighborhood came and added things, or if they needed mittens or hats for their kids, or if somebody was coming along and using the food box and they saw that there were things there, those things were always open and available for the community, because we don't always know who our neighbors are.
Trying to figure out how to engage is a challenge, but we get a lot of people or a group of people together who want to do that, and we start throwing ideas out, and we spitball them, and we talk about them, and we come up with some group consensus about what might work, and talk about what others have done, and then we get out the front doors and we list it, and we make sure that we're out there. We go out as often as we can during the summer with ice cream and dog treats just to be there on the corner, and we reach out to the people who are passing by, and we make introductions and we ask questions. We had a listening session over in the parking lot that we flyered for and invited people to, and it was amazingly well attended, and the whole point of it was to learn about our neighbors and figure out what their needs are and what they value about being in this area, and how can we engage more with them. So it's a lot of listening, and it's a lot of being outside of the building, just being present and being around, because otherwise those connections aren't going to establish themselves. People aren't likely to just wander in the front door and start telling us about what's going on and what they need. So we interact with them on a much more personal and intentional level.
I'm going to pass this to Kathy. Because Kathy here is also part of the dream team. And
you think I have something to say?
Yes.
And the subject again, I mean,
Our discernment and
I like to be involved in experimental things. I mean, I'm very busy here. I've got my lot of hats I wear, but I like the Dream Team because it's pop-up, it's innovation, and it's without the fear of looking foolish, of trying something. And because then my mind would start going negative as to what it isn't. The church I was at once where everyone sat in the same place. I didn't stay there long. So I like experimenting. I like trying new things. I like strangers.
That's why we have two very different people on our team.
That's why it's a team.
Yeah.
Everyone brings different gifts and a different perspective, and that's really important. When you're discovering and discerning, how things might evolve, or, really, what is God calling us to do? having that ability to have many different people on the team and those perspectives, everybody brings their own gifts. And, you know, whatever the makeup of our team is at any moment, because it hasn't been the same. It is not what it was when we began in 2018. It's a completely different team.
Yeah, you are the only original, right?
I am the original.
Yeah. I mean, one person transitions to being a senior warden, but...
Which is us also.
Yeah.
Good information to know how this evolves is going off the dream team or staying on the dream team and becoming a warden. It affects change for our whole community. So if you have felt like, wow, there's something really cool going on here, I hope that you are kind of sensing that there's an energy that maybe doesn't exist anywhere else. It really is because of all the people who have thought about what church is on the inside and taking the church to the outside.
I want to add one thing. I remember the first time I met Jeremy Greenhouse. Jeremy came here and preached Discernment and talked about the public church. And Jeremy is at Augsburg University. And he said, you know, I think when the folks at St. Luke's did this, they thought that they were going to open the doors and people were going to come in and sit in the pews. And that's not what really public church is all about. And he said, you know, we all learned, our team learned, that it was about us opening the doors and walking outside the door. Because the process of the Dream Team is to accompany our neighbors, to listen to what our neighbors are interested in, to think about it as a team and how we as a community of St. Luke and James can be out in the community and what we have to offer and what faith stories people bring to us. And then to learn and interpret those and then to proclaim them and do things outside of the doors, those lovely red doors, connecting with people who we don't normally see except maybe in passing as we're driving by or parking here. But also our community is not just this neighborhood. Our community, because we are in a focal point for 4 neighborhoods, there are lots of different people who make up the neighborhood that we all are in right now today. Jeremy Myers, sorry, not Jeremy.
Yeah.
Jeremy Greenhouse is here.
Yeah, musician.
I just want to commend you because I'm trying to get other faith communities in Minnesota to do what you're doing. It's easy to just give away stuff, which is not unimportant, but trying to develop two-way relationships with our neighbors is huge and transformative. And I'm curious about the spiritual practices that have undergirded this work and enabled you to do this work, because I'm sure there have been good days and discouraging days. And we learn more through, or I do more through my failures than anything that goes well. We have to keep trying things. But tell me about the spiritual practices that have undergirded this work. And I'd love to also hear just some stories of transformation from just putting yourself out there, which I've learned is really hard for people in our faith communities to do. Putting yourself out there and the Holy Spirit working in your willingness to be out there and vulnerable.
Larry,
I'm Larry Reynolds, Director of Music here. The one thing, I've been here 10 years, and so after 9 years, I brought up several times. We have a church at the other end of the block, Lyndhurst Congregational, and it's a classic UCC church, very progressive. Well, actually, their nature is our nature. I mean, we really share just about every goal or whatever. And so we decided that we would invite them to take part in a neighborhood caroling party. And that was really an easy do. And so we did. They came from their church, walked up to us, enjoying us. And we had at least 40 or 50 people between the two congregations, lots of children. And we caroled around the neighborhood. One of our parishioners, we stopped at, and she served glue, Swedish Yule glue, and so that kind of worked. And then we ended up at their church, and they put on a beautiful coffee reception for us, and we sat down with them and had long conversations. And they have gymnasiums, so our children were down tearing up the gymnasium while we were doing coffee and sweets and savories in their parish hall. And that, to me, was a miracle, that we finally did something together. And so, that, for me, that was a dream come true. So.
So, your question was about spiritual practices. And something for us here in this space, the spiritual practice, is singing. And so the idea that we had this opportunity to share in that spiritual practice with not only another faith community, but in the neighborhood as we went along. I don't know how many people who attended that realized what a holy moment that was. And it was, and that's the spiritual practices for myself personally. I always feel like when I really feel the holy, that's when I know that spiritual practice, you know, that I'm really practicing. Because we always say that with listening and all of our spiritual practices of being a public church is listening, accompanying, interpreting, discerning, proclaiming. So with everything that we do, and as well as things like walking the labyrinth, of grounding ourselves in Scripture. For 5 years we grounded ourselves in Ezekiel, over and over and over again. But even as we were going over and over and over again, we always heard something new. It always was something that took us into a new direction, into a new space, into a way of being able to try something new. So I feel like that was such a gift to all of us to have something to really ground ourselves on. And of course, in prayer. What was fun about the process we've been in is this last couple of years we've been in a relationship with Epiphany. Plymouth, yes, thank you. I used to go there. I lived there, for sure. But we got to be prayer partners because everyone else who was doing this work were they were Lutherans or another group that we were with was Shiloh Temple. So we had all these amazing other people that had very different experiences and very same experiences. But getting to share with them and pray with them, we had a number of retreats and overnights and really many long days in a row where not only were we as a group in prayer and grounded in Scripture and moving through the world in all these spaces or spiritual practices, but also we were getting to do this with a much, much larger group of folks. And that really helped all of us, I think, to deepen just ourselves personally as well as our group, that we would then bring that, all of those things that we have learned, I know have started to take root in everything that we are doing here in this space. So if you weren't quite seeing anything blooming yet, things are going to be blooming. Yes, Larry?
Just real quick. And I've been here 10 years, and this has really, the community enjoying new things, trying new things, has become very apparent. And it's so rare that you're in a faith community, in an Episcopal Church especially, that loves an opportunity to do something new and different.
Yes.
Because you don't have the hue and cry of folks like, oh, I can't do that.
We don't do it that
Well,
way.
yeah, we've never done it that way. You don't hear that. So,
I want to talk about transformation of people. For the last 2 Peace Days, we've had a young boy, it wasn't the same boy each year, who saw the sign we were going to have our doors open and the labyrinth open. And in 2022, this little boy insisted that his parents had to take the time to have him come in and walk the labyrinth. And this year, we were about to shut the door and bring our signs in. It was 10 minutes to 4, and this young boy and his mother pulled up on their bicycles, and he came because he knew that he was going to be able to walk the labyrinth. And so he came into this space. He couldn't wait. I mean, you know, like he threw his bike down. He wasn't worried about what was going to happen to his bicycle. He wanted to come in here.
He was safe.
He was safe. And, you know, I know that Peter and Kathy have been here religiously every month. And sometimes they have walked the labyrinth, and maybe another congregant from St. Luke and James has come, but this is an invitation that we would always like to make to anybody. And if you know somebody, the doors are open. There's a sign that says, come in and enjoy the silence and walk the labyrinth.
First Saturday of the month,
First Saturday.
10 to 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's something you could do, but these were 2 children, and for whatever, that was part of their experience here. And who understands what their faith journey was? We don't really know. You know, we're talking about an 8-year-old boy who wanted to come in here and walk the labyrinth. So a faith journey means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I think Larry's point is that it's a opportunity to not always be doing what we've always done. It's an opportunity to try something different and find out what somebody around the neighborhood or around the block or at our picnic or hot dogs in the parking lot to find out what the heck they were doing to Brian Avenue and how that was affecting our neighbors who use our parking lot and who park on the street, to find out what's really going on so that we can do things in a different way and be part of the outside and of God's world and not just in these lovely 4 walls.
First, can I just add, I kind of want to pick up on what everybody is saying, what you just said a moment ago, Larry. I'm in a different Episcopal Church every Sunday, and what your dream team is doing, I think about the fact that God's church is the only institution that exists for the people who aren't there.
yeah.
But also how important it is to be out, to show up as Jesus' follower in every space in our lives and what a difference that makes. But I have to say, this is, a lot of people struggle with the similar process I'm working with because they think it's a church growth program.
Oh.
And throughout the 9 months, they're just having trouble, but this is not a program. It's a new way of being church together that is energizing and exciting, and it's different. But when you do walk into a church where there's energy and joy, I think it's the Holy Spirit. You sense it palpably. You might not be able to name it as the Holy Spirit, but you feel it. And you can also feel it when you sense there's just desperation on people's breath. So you pick up on the energy and joy that comes from the practices, that comes from putting yourself out there in the learnings. And I'm curious, in the time that we have left, if you'd be willing to share some of your key learnings from this process so far.
May I ask? Yeah, will there be time for questions? Yes, yes. How about we do this? Thank you. Why don't you answer this and then we'll do.
All right, Nina, I'm going to give them the microphone.
Oh, wasn't for me. Well, my question is, if we have, any of us in the church have ideas for the dream team, is there a space besides, is there an invitation for us to share those ideas with you? Like a dream team idea box or something?
And that's good. And we do meet on Zoom, socially distanced in our homes, on the second Saturday of every month at 9:30. And we can certainly publish that Zoom link to people if you want to just show up. But I think your idea about having a spot or a place, because sometimes going up and asking a person who's busy and running around doing 16 things might look like a challenge, but I think that's a challenge for us to find a spot that we can make a dream team box and figure out where that will go. I mean, we're good at making boxes here. There's a food box, there's a prayer box, there's 3 little free reading color boxes outside. There's food boxes in here, so I'm certainly sure that it could be a link.
We can do a link and an email.
Yeah, a link and an email, and we can have a physical box.
And it should go with, it could be as great, nothing's crazy.
Yeah.
Nothing's crazy.
Well, we could let the children decorate a box for us. There we go, with glitter.
One thing I might add to that idea box, I would personally love it, is when something all of a sudden strikes you, because if you could also include perhaps the story that goes with it. You know, like if you ran into a neighbor, had a conversation, and it's like, wow, I heard this, and we have an opportunity. Have we ever thought of doing this, whatever, you know, making Jell-O every Tuesday? But adding that story into it with the ideas, that's what's really, it's about the stories. Really, when we start bringing it all together, when we're listening to our neighbors, listening to God, listening to the things that we might be invited into, it's the stories that are going to draw us into what God is really calling us to do. So the story is important.
I would say learning for me, for those of us who moved in here and joined this already vital congregation, the learning experience for me was to get immersed in the spiritual connection of the church and the work that the Riverside Innovation Hub was doing that allowed me to not feel like an orphan. And I told Kathy Gear that when I came to my first Dream Team Zoom meeting, and I was the only St. James person. And I said, I kind of feel like an orphan here. And Kathy laughed, because that's what she would do. But, you know, I don't feel like an orphan anymore. And I brought some more of my family members in, and we are now a whole community. So having the Dream Team and the work of the Innovation Hub and Public Church happening at the same time that we join the congregations and bringing the richness of what we did at St. James and replicating some of that, and now finding out that there's some St. Luke's people who love to work at the Mayhaha Food Shop, that there are people who are connected to things that we did there that we all now do together as one congregation, and that's a part of being this holy community and feeling the connection and knowing that there were things that were already happening here. I mean, healing prayer happens every month. Healing prayer happens here every Sunday. Healing prayer happens here all the time, 24/7. So I think there's many things that we have all grown together to do, and that's been a learning experience for me, and I'm going to hand it to Kathy.
No, you would be able to tell the story about the backpacks.
I am one of their support district.
There are people that want to come in here and sing.
Or 12.
Backpacks.
At the school.
Oh, yes. All right, so I was doing things at Every Meal, doing food packing. I don't know if you know about that. Every Meal is an organization that's now 13 years old. It started as a Share the Story, and we pack meals that go in children's backpacks in schools. And last year they served 500 different school and learning communities. And I came and shared that information with some people. And Jim and Kurt went one time and did some packing and wanted to contribute. And my friend Gail Jimala came, and Gail Jimala keeps going, and Gail Jimala goes all the time. And other people in the community are doing that. And then we found out about Stonebridge School, which was another Dream Team thing, because Louise and Neil and Sheila went over there to make peace signs with kids at Stonebridge, which is a charter school right on 46 in Lindale. And we found out that they were participating in the Every Meal program. So we went over every Thursday, got labels for all the children who received those bags, put them on the right color bags. There's a lot of different kind of food. And so we were participating in helping those kids and those families who have hunger issues, because as we know, as Susan said today, the hunger issue never goes away, and it's only gotten bigger. And we'll continue to do that again this year, once we have a connected person there. And then, of course, Ruth Ann has been reading over at Stonebridge on her own, and we're going to hopefully do some of those classroom reading things as the people who started out working with food packing at Stonebridge. So there's a lot of things in the community. Helen, you want to ask a question?
No, my question is there anybody out here who would like to ask a question? We have about 7 minutes, and we want to make sure that the questions are addressed too. Tony?
Oh, I have just a quick question. I'm really interested in what you've learned about the community. Obviously, the connection with the charter school. But what are some stories, what are some themes that have stood out for you?
In brief, I think we've learned that the community is more diverse than we think it is. That they've learned that they care about their dogs, they care about kids, they care about education, and
They care about hunger issues.
they care about hunger issues. We have folks, children and adults who regularly help to organize and bring things to the food box. Now that we have the reading colored books, little free libraries, and just the other day, this week, there was a couple that had noticed the sign underneath as to the mission of the reading colored books. I drew their attention to that, and they're like, well, we have all kinds of those books in our house. We're going to bring them. And I was like, can you pass that along to your neighbors as well? And they're like, we're on it. We're going to make sure the neighborhood really knows what these books are and what these little free libraries are for. So I feel like we've already got it. There's so many stories, and I would love to go all day on every story that I have, because I have too many.
Tony?
That's a question.
You've been engaging and listening in the neighborhood for the first two verbs in the little litany here. I'm wondering if you can make any report on what you've heard from the neighborhood.
Well, we know that the neighborhood sees us now as a place where people have stepped outside the door, and that some people have been surprised because their experience often of churches is that people come into church and the door shuts and they have worship and then they go get in their cars and they drive away. So we know that the neighborhood...
You've heard people say that?
Well, yes, we have, and I think this church, St. Luke's, had already opened its doors in many ways. That's not to say that this is something that's only new happening.
I mean, not what you've heard neighbors say about us. What have you heard neighbors say about themselves?
About themselves. Well, we do know that our neighbors were very concerned when the whole upheaval with street changes here, and that's a huge thing. If you imagine what your neighborhood would be if all of a sudden the city said, okay, well, we're going to make your busy street, we're going to take this bus that's been on your block for 50 years and take it off your block. And we're also going to make your block one way, going this way, and then when we get to an intersection, it's going to be going one way the other way. And how is that going to affect us in our ability to get around? Really narrow, no place to park. Yeah. So Tony, we did hear that people were concerned about the livability of their community and how they would be getting around. And when we had our listening post at the parking lot, people wanted to know, there is somebody I can really talk to about this, not that we can change the city's mind, but that we were all in this together. And that they were concerned about that. We do know that people are concerned about hunger issues, and we've said that because we know people are actually using our box and they're putting things into our boxes.
Anyone else back here?
I'm going to just take one. Tony, did that answer your question?
Well, that's one
That was one.
more answer. But
One story? Tony, I
doing this
have
for 2 years.
so many stories. I would be happy. I know so many people in our neighborhood personally. I've been invited to their front porches. I have kids that live right behind our parking lot that go to the church, Solomon's Porch.
We do some story time.
Yes, we can.
But we can share all those kinds of stories that would help everyone maybe know the neighborhood as well.
We have a question here.
So, question I have is at St. James, we, and the Minnehaha Food Shelf, we worked quite a bit with a particular person who's in charge of the Homeless East Neighborhood Association. Have you done anything with the local neighborhood association?
A little bit, because we are in the nexus of 4 communities.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it is this, 46th and Lindale is like, it's like the 4 states that touch each other. So they're very different communities. The community that's east of Lindale and north of 46 is exceptionally different from the community that's south of 46 and Lindale and to the west towards the parkway. So we've had some communities that we've had better connections and better communication with than others. And, you know, also I want to give Larry his kudos. You know, we've had a couple of things that we planned, and Larry, who loves lots of internet connection and loves socializing on media, posted a whole bunch of things on Nextdoor and Facebook pages and neighborhood organizations. Just as an example, we had a puppet show this summer, and we had 45 people who showed up, and more than half of them were people in the community who heard about it from social media places that we had posted that information. So, and I think it behooves us, and that's probably one of the things we could do more of. And it's always good to be asked those questions and reminded that community leaders are people that we can connect with who often know a lot about the neighborhood, more than we do once or twice a week. Thank you, Ann.
I think there are lots of questions and lots of discussion, lots of stories, and it sounds exciting for something in the future. Thank you for coming. I would like to give the microphone to Blair for just a minute at the end here, and then when you're finished, please clean up your crumbs and your cups, and we'll see you next week. But Blair.
Thank you, and I'll be concise. I just love what you're doing. It's absolutely in alignment with the bishop's vision that we go deeper spiritually, that we get out of our churches, as the National Church said not too long ago, that we learn how to follow Jesus into the neighborhood and travel lightly. We have to try new things. This is a time of incredible change. We have to keep learning, and I think that learning is primarily spiritual and theological. But what is really critical in this process, as well as the similar process I'm running, is that this not be something on the side of a congregation, but this be something that is embraced by the entire congregation, that it's a new way of being church together. Otherwise, you'll have transformation on the margins, but if you really, what will be really incredible is if all of you can participate in some way in this work. And I really look forward to following you in the days ahead. And I'm just really thrilled with this incredible spirit-filled work you've been doing. It's so important. So thank you all for coming, and I hope you record those stories and show those amazing images you brought yesterday with everyone. Thank you.
And I want to ask, if you've done anything or been part of the Dream Team, would you please raise your hand here? If you've been part of the Dream Team.
Or done anything
or
with
done
it,
anything
participated in some way, shape, or form.
So it is something we can do, and please feel free to connect with us, and I will, I think we'll give the Guided Play Kids an opportunity to decorate a box. I'm sure that will be...
Because they're in charge of the ice cream.
They might as well.
They can go.
Thank you.
Continue.
Thank you.